Please welcome Diana Moyano.
Thank you, Cynthia. Thank you,
Thank
everybody, for being here. I know that given the fact that it's like at noon, some of you might be either, busy with other stuff, and you decided to come here to listen to this, lessons that I've learned, and I really appreciate your time. So let me just start by sharing my screen. And so before we begin, and I just want to make sure that everybody can see my screen. Cynthia, if you can confirm, thank you. Perfect. So yeah, before we begin, I would like to start with eggs. Basically, there's more than one way to cook an egg. Everyone has a valid and creative approach regarding their career journey. And what I'm presenting right now, it's only based on my own experience and of those around me. There are different shapes and colors. This talk is for everybody, but yes, some topics I'll mention will be more relevant if you're coming from another country or if you're going through some career transition. And for non-immigrants, this is a great opportunity to raise awareness and understanding. And of course, like you can take some of the advice that I will provide for your own career, right? I will also provide some concrete and practical advice, as well as some holistic and general approaches to how I dealt with my career. Some of them might not look that related to your professional experience, but they are still very valuable. And, my advice is a set of sustainable approaches. I'm talking about healthy, manageable, and recurring changes. I am a hardcore believer of the power of habit. And if you're looking for, let's say, tricks and tricks and tips and all these kinds of things, you can always look on them online. There are amazing resources. This is more like a long run kind of approach. And I'll try to be as general as possible, but if you have specific questions related to a career transition into technology, for example, you can always ask me during the Q&A session. So let's start with the first one, which is embracing change with humility. And I will ask you to learn to unlearn, which is a bit confusing for some of you. And I just would like to start with my own story. So this is me. And I came from Colombia when I was 22 years old. Other than sporadic jobs and an internship, I had no additional experience. And I was a fresh undergraduate, from a business school. I actually did a bachelor's in business administration. And probably this might sound familiar to some of you. So I came here in 2012. And to be honest, I really didn't know at that time what I wanted to do exactly. My idea was to stay here probably 6 months, but that never happened. When I was studying at this English as second language school, a teacher asked me, "Why don't you go to college?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, that kind of makes sense." And then when I was finishing college, people asked me, "Why don't you work here since you have a permit?" And I was like, "That also makes sense. I would do that." And when I was working, my friends asked me, "Why don't you apply for permanent residence?" And I was like, "Yes, why not?" Those are the kinds of things that I was facing. And at the end of the day, the opportunities presented themselves, and I decided to take the risk. I decided to make the choices, and here I am. And I definitely feel old at this point in 2021. But during these years, I've also seen people succeeding and growing, as well as others that didn't do it as much. So probably most of the common issues I found in most cases, I would say the first one would be related to your comfort zone. So people are usually over-reliant of their comfort zone, and sometimes that might not be the best case. So I understand it's normal for us to approach those who share similar values, languages, religion, etc. And I'm not asking you to kick them out of your life, right? But you need to expand your circles as soon as possible. You need to build trust across different groups. And that takes time because it requires some sort of a special kind of empathy. You need to understand in what way some cultures are versus low context, which ones are hierarchical, which ones are more individualistic, and so on. And at the end of the day, you are less likely to have control over the people you will be working with. So you have to prepare for that, right? So once again, we have the second one, which is related to ego. I've mostly seen this in people who have so much experience back home, and they think that they will perform the same way that they did it before. They won't expect anything less than that. And when they come here, they experience a major roadblock, right? So it's important to understand that you just cannot use the same framework to a completely different environment. So acknowledging this basically is an act of humility, is an act of wisdom, understanding that by leaving your country, our families and our friends, we could be in a somehow vulnerable situation, right? So that's something that we need to acknowledge. And if there's anything that you can do, that's where I actually bring the concept of unlearning things, right? So you have to unlearn certain social rules that work back home, but are no longer applicable here. The way you make contacts might not be the same way that you will do in Canada. So those are the kinds of things that you will learn with time, right? So coming back to these two issues, both examples are basically reactions that come from fear to change and the unexpected, right? However, just keep in mind that experiencing slight discomfort, let's say self-doubt, moderate challenge, and so on, is quite healthy and necessary to succeed here. So you have to keep in mind it. As for the second lesson learned that I had, it's patience. And of course, it's key. And of course, easier said than done. You know, we want to do as many things as possible. We want to create stuff. We want to explore new possibilities. But sometimes we need to pause and wait. There are certain things that are out of our control. And if we're not aware of this, we become anxious. It affects our careers. It affects our relationships. And it could affect our own happiness. So, you know, like I guess the best example of this is this specific document or piece of ID or, you know, like your permanent residence. This one requires a lot of process on your end. And sorry, this is my cat, just ignore it, right? So basically the kinds of things that you will need to keep in mind is that you're applying for a visa, you're actually eventually getting a work permit or a study permit, depending on your case. By the time you're applying for the permanent residence itself, you need to provide some transcripts, and that takes so much time. Then you have to do some tests, let's say CELPIP, IELTS, and TEF Canada if you are trying to have this test for French. After that, you are doing some, you know, medical exams, and it seems overwhelming and quite frustrating, right? But probably my piece of advice here is like, do what you're required to do as soon as possible. I've seen so many people who waited till the very last moment. They didn't consult it with their immigrant lawyers or advisors, and then time flies. They realize that they could have done so many things in the past, and they are now struggling. So I would suggest you start as soon as possible, do your research, and also once you are done by providing all these documents, you are done. You need to be patient. And, you know, at this point, I guess the immigration process has at least slowed down due to COVID. And it's an extra challenge, I understand, but that cannot affect you in the way that can paralyze you, right? So just, you need to keep that in mind. You do as much as you can. Once you're done with that, move on, do other things, and hope for the best, basically. And for people who are not going through this process, I would suggest to be aware of this process. And, you know, we need you to support us because we're going through a process that is extremely stressful, right? So the third one that I want to share with you is maintaining your own branding. And I mean, basically being in control of how others see you. In other words, just try to be unique, right? Branding could be anything, but I'll focus specifically on the resume because resume is a tangible means to your own career and professional identity. And just to let it like a very clear bottom line, the basics, especially for those who recently came from another country, you are not supposed to provide certain information that back home was required. So for example, a picture, physical attributes, origin, marital status, and all of that. In Canada, that's not something that you would do. But I'm just going to leave that aside because I just want to show something that I've learned for the past years. And that's the fact that there are, multiple iterations of your resume. It's just a representation of how you see yourself as a professional. So just to give you an example, this is the first resume that I had. That was in 2010. And basically, it was not professional. It was extremely I used words that were not in the jargon related to the area that I wanted to get into. Eventually, I transitioned to a more formal, serious kind of resume. After that, I took a bit of a risk. I decided to be more like a design-oriented kind of person. I had this specific one-pager, and it looked good by the time I was giving it to a person, like in person, basically. But by the time I was submitting this online, the problem was that those systems would just read the lines as they were not two columns, but they will just do it as one column, and that would completely affect my application process. So I had to get back to the original one. And as I was transitioning to this new career, which was in technology, I used as many transferable skills as I could. And that's why this specific document looks extremely overwhelming. Then when I realized that, I decided to move it to 2 pages. But then I also realized that basically people wouldn't spend much time reading my resume, at least the second page. And that was probably the most important part of my resume. So I was like, probably 2 pages are not good for me. People usually spend, recruiters usually spend 30 seconds on each resume. And that's something that I wanted to avoid, right? So I ended up with this version, which is only 1 page. And a very important thing here is that, you want to be consistent, right? How others see you or how others recognize me for. In my case, I want to be seen as an AI ML translator and interpreter. That's what I try to show not only on my LinkedIn account, which is a more general view of my profile, but also in my resume, which was a very tailored version of my profile, right? I was able to understand eventually who is my target, what is relevant to my audience. As I said, after playing with different formats, I wanted to see a version that could show these people that I was, let's say, project oriented, right? So for example, I showed here in the 3rd section under analytics and AI ML projects, even though it's a small section, I was still able to provide some links that will show my portfolio, right? So that was a very important thing that gave me so much leverage by the time I was applying, because they were able to see that there were so many different use cases. There's a purpose to use the specific tool. And also you have a problem solving mindset. You have a problem, you have a methodology, you have results, and you have next steps, right? So at the end of the day, you are a storyteller. And let me this one wants to say hi here. So let me just put her here. And another important thing is that as I was getting into technology, I also had to show some sort of a portfolio that will be more tech oriented. And that's why I had the second one. This is more related to coders, which are more like, it's called GitHub. And that shows your skills from a coding perspective. So as you see, compared to the entire page, analytics and ML projects, it's very small, yet it provides so much information that people can eventually look into if they're very interested. And they will be able to see the results, they will be able to see in what way I work and so on. So that was definitely something that helped me in my brand. Once again, I wanted to become a storyteller of my own brand, and that's what I did. The next one is related to working on your communication skills, and that's it. That's probably one of the most important things that I've heard from different employers, you know, because I keep constant communication with small and medium-sized companies, and one of their main concerns is the communication skills of the person they're hiring. So just put yourself in the employer's shoes, right? So you are representing my company. If you show this kinds of information, what do you think the other person would think, right? Like this person will go crazy by just seeing how unprofessional this email is. And that's something that you can definitely work on your own pace, right? Like the sooner the better. Is very specific, work on your grammar, your spelling, and so on. But there are some other nuanced aspects of language, and those are the kinds of things that I would like to touch on. So let's say you want to get to a specific point, and I noticed that, so I come from Colombia, we speak Spanish, and Spanish, in order to get to a specific point, it looks like a spiral. So basically, it talks about this thing and that thing, and then it gets to the point slowly, and then it gets there. But English is a completely different story. By the time I was writing essays in English, I realized that they do this. They basically go to the point, they're very concise and direct, and that's something that I really needed to practice. And as I'm saying, that takes time. However, you also need tact. You need to have some sort of empathy with your audience. So just to give you a good example, when I was working, that was probably the first or second year of working here in Canada, I was trying to deal with a customer, and then I answered an email, and I thought that I was super professional because I went to the point, I was super direct and so on. And then my boss came back and said that I was extremely rude to that customer. And I was not entirely sure why that was at that time. But that's something that I've seen not only from my own experience, but other Spanish speakers. And that's something that requires some time, as I'm saying, tact, empathy, and so on. Probably the aspect that frustrates me the most from seeing it from other people is this. So you have people who are extremely bright, brilliant people, and they cannot express themselves as much as they want. So that's just, I mean, that you can make up for that if you're working in a team, because your colleagues could communicate on your behalf in a way, right? But there's still a huge opportunity that is being missed. And plus, it's something that you know you can improve, right? So in the long run, you really need to understand that, yes, you can rely on others, but once again, your communication skills are a bridge for your success, especially if you are eventually applying for managerial positions and so on. So what are the kinds of things that I would suggest? You need to take a long run approach. You need to immerse yourself into the language. And it could be as simple as watching movies, listening to podcasts with no subtitles, probably bottom line English subtitles is okay. Something as simple as changing your OS to English, that's also a possibility. You can always read news, you can attend events, in this case it will be online, and then you'll notice how your brain will do the rest. So that's the kind of long run approach that you can take. Of course, you'll need some feedback from other people, and you should ask for feedback. That's a very important thing to consider. The next one is building long-lasting relationships, right? And you need to go deeper than just small talk about the weather, which is something that we currently do when we are networking with other people. So the first one is more related to networking, right? And you basically are trying to build some sort of social capital, rapport. You're trying to build in trust among the people that you are communicating with. So it could be at so many different levels. So for example, at a very shallow level, you are connecting with people via LinkedIn. One of the things that I've noticed is that people are more open to help out and talk to someone they don't even know. That wouldn't happen back home as much as in here, for example. And sometimes, once again, we are constrained by our perceptions from back home, and we just stop doing things that could have benefited us in this case. So if you have a chance to, like have any, you can invite someone to any coffee at this point. You can have a 30-minute conversation with them. It's a pretty good experience. If you really want to change careers, you should look for people who are already in the industry that you're interested. And you can just ask us something as simple as, hey, I am thinking of transitioning to a career that you are currently in. I just would like some piece of advice from your own, like if you can help me out, and I want to ask you some questions and so on, right? One of the things that I've noticed is that some people actually ask for a job to a person they just met, and that's just a no-no. That's something that, at least from my experience, has never worked when I see other people doing that. And it's just like disrespectful at the end of the day. It's blunt and it doesn't bring any good outcome. Actually, it could affect your reputation. So just keep that in mind. At the same time, you can see more valuable connections. And sometimes it takes time, but it's definitely worth it. So as a good example, as I was working at the Organization of Women in International Trade, one of the events that I was helping with was related to some sort of awards, and one of the winners, I had the opportunity to talk to her, and that was probably 3 to 4 years ago. We stayed in touch briefly through LinkedIn, and we keep each other in mind and so on. And by the time I was finishing my master's, she was the one who came to me and she said, hey, what are you gonna do after your master's? And then she just offered me an opportunity to work with her. It was completely unexpected, but it just came from a constant, interaction with this person, genuine, meaningful interaction with this person that eventually turned out into a very interesting job opportunity. For the other one, it's being surrounded by the best of the best, people who inspire you. So one of the best ways to rapidly grow your career is by joining, let's say, professional groups and study groups and so on. So you have to go where smart people go, where proactive people go. And why that happens is because, other than network opportunities, it mainly prompts you to set a higher bar, right? So, of course, by setting a higher bar, it will affect your comfort zone, as we have mentioned before. But once again, if you are experiencing this type of discomfort, you're probably doing the right thing, because it's about change, and change is important, right? So those are two very important things that I want to mention for this specific lesson. The next one is that you will need to take some risks, but not any type of risk. I'm asking you to take calculated risks. So what are those calculated risks? Every choice that you make involves a consequence or maybe an outcome. And also it involves an opportunity cost, what you're missing out by doing that specific thing that will give you that outcome, right? So it's basically the second best alternative to what you have chosen, right? And that's how you actually take some sort of a calculated risk. You are able to understand what are the consequences from both sides, and if you're willing to take it or not. So a good example of this is how I decided to pivot into my new career. So let's say I had this desired outcome of, being probably a teacher, being able to help small and medium-sized companies transitioning into a more AI perspective and so on. So let's say that this was my initial career. And then I decided to take my first choice, which involved some sort of a risk, which was taking online courses. That was a low risk. My opportunity cost was sacrificing time and sometimes money, and that's okay. But my outcome was I was able to understand what's required to pivot to my new career, right? So that was the outcome out of it. The second risk that I took was actually taking a certificate. This one was a medium to high risk. My opportunity cost was money, and most importantly, I actually quit my job when I did that. However, the outcome was extremely good. I changed my habits. I became more disciplined. And I also had my fundamentals in statistics, probability, and machine learning. And finally, by the time I took the next step, which was my master's degree, it was a huge risk. My opportunity cost was a tremendous investment. And by the time I was going through half of the program, I decided to quit my job again and fully dedicated to my program. The outcome was huge. I got recognition for my hard work. I got strong connections. I got internships and other job opportunities. So it's important to keep in mind that I wouldn't been able to do my master's degree if I haven't taken those previous risks, right? Everything is a process. I'm not asking you to gamble, as I'm saying. I'm asking you to consider your different options and grow, over time. So, if I remained in my previous career, I could have still grown a lot, right? But I decided to take another route that gave me more leverage. And plus, having past experience in international trade and logistics is also a big plus, not only due to the transferable skills that I got, but also due to the interest in applying artificial intelligence in supply chain use cases, which was something that I was not expecting. And I was still very useful, at least for other companies. The next lesson will be being resilient and learn from setbacks. And everything is about perseverance, right? So, when we are applying for jobs, for example, we will get all sorts of no's, and that's extremely frustrating, right? It's an answer that we don't want to listen to, but I just want you to consider a different perspective for those no's. So this is a book called Never Split the Difference. And by the way, if you want to get some books, for example, this one is an amazing book. Buy local, support small business around your area. That will be super nice to do for companies, small businesses, and so on. So this author basically was saying, look, no is a great answer to get. No is a redirection, right? Basically, no will be something that will make you think, okay, so how can I turn this into a yes in the future, right? So always try to think ahead and try to see how I can look for some sort of a feedback, for example. Or you can also give yourself a bit feedback after you go through some sort of a, some sort of questions answered session, like an interview or something like that. After that, try to think about the things that you could have done better, and that's extremely valuable. You can also use your network to do that. You need to understand that the people who will eventually provide you some sort of feedback, they do it in good faith. So just take it with that value. That's gonna make a huge difference as well. And if you want to go ahead and or think bigger by the time you're working with your teams, right? If you're thinking of teamwork, let's say after a major milestone, you should have some sort of a recap session. Once again, what went well, what kind of things can be improved, what things did it go well, and so on, right? So the power of not having something, of getting that no, it's actually an opportunity to understand what needs to be done to get an eventual yes in the future. So that's a perspective of resilience that I wanted to share with you. The next one is about being proactive, which is, of course, going above and beyond expectations. We have heard this numerous times, and once again, I'm just providing you a perspective that I got from this specific book, very well-known book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. So the author was referring to a circle of concern, something that we cannot control, and we cannot do anything about it, right? And the other one is the circle of influence, which is something that you can do about it, right? So if you see here, this is a very small circle of influence compared to the circle of concern. This is a reactive focus. So as the name says, you are basically reacting towards whatever is happening around you. Another approach is having a circle of influence that has a bigger reach, and this is a proactive focus. So this is someone who is trying to do as much as possible and leave the rest, or leave, having slower chances for external agents to affect your life, your career, and so on. So some of the different examples that you can have is that, for example, my professor, let's say, will be more forgiving of my typos and grammar mistakes, since he or she knows that English is not my first language. That's a reactive approach, right? Versus you are leaving, your focus on improving your communication skills. You are doing this regardless of what this person might be thinking. Hence, your circle of influence has more reach. Another example is that in an interview, let's say I was told that I had no relevant experience in the area that I was transitioning into. Hence, I created a portfolio with various examples that could count as relevant experience. Once again, I'm taking a proactive focus. Another one, my boss is not convinced about an idea that I have to improve a process. So I'm a big fan of prototypes and proof of concepts. So this is a proactive focus. I'm showing my boss how it would look like already, so this person can play around with it. It's tangible, and probably I will be able to convince this person. So notice that there's still an area representing the circle of concern. So you still get rejections, you still experience setbacks, but that's okay. That's something that all of us experience, and you have done as much as possible, and that's still a proactive focus. Okay. The next one is about volunteering, and very important. To give is to receive, and the reason why I'm saying this is because people usually think that volunteering is just a waste of time, especially in different cultures. So for example, back home, if I say that I'm volunteering, people will ask me why I'm doing this. But there are so many different benefits. And plus, here in Canada, volunteering is extremely valuable, unlike other countries. So one of the things that I will ask you to consider is to be strategic and to be hardworking. So from a strategic perspective, every type of volunteering job is extremely valuable. Anything that requires you to help others, it's something that I really appreciate as a human being. However, if you have a chance to volunteer for something that is related to your career, that will give you some sort of an extra edge. So just try to consider that. And what are the kinds of benefits that you will get out of, from volunteering? So the first one is that you can work on your own weaknesses, right? I'm not asking you to make mistakes as much as you can, but at least you will be able to understand things that, or you will have opportunities that you wouldn't have in your current job, for example, and you will learn out of it. It would also flex your creativity, depending on the organization that you will be volunteering for. Some of them will give you so much freedom that you will be able to come up with amazing ideas that will help the organization succeed and will be extremely good for your resume. You will learn skills. So for example, let's say as I was working in my entry-level job, I was unable to, for example, delegate or do something like that, or present or make presentations or something like that. So at the time I was volunteering, I was delegating, I was actually taking a role of a coordinator, or like I was able to develop my leadership skills, and that was something that gave me some sort of leverage compared to other people who were going through the same process. You can grow your professional network, and that involves absolutely everything. You can get amazing mentors. You can get long-lasting, friendships, and also referrals for your job. As I'm saying, in Canada, companies value the effort that you usually do for non-for-profits, and that's a good way to do so. And you can produce real outcomes, right? Like the things that you are doing, you might be able to see them in action, and that's extremely rewarding. That's something that sometimes won't be able to I mean, it won't be as common in the company that you're currently working on, depending on the nature of the company, right? So, but in general, I've seen that based on my own experience, I was able to do amazing things, which kept me, motivated, and that's why I volunteered for more than 4 years, and it was such a rewarding experience. And the final lesson that I would like to share with you is that you can do anything, but you cannot do everything. You have to take things easy. And the reason why I'm saying this is that, I mean, I'm not asking you to do everything that I just said during, like, all the different lessons that I've mentioned at the same pace, because it's going to be a bit overwhelming. You need to know how to prioritize these kinds of things. And you really need to, I mean, if you really need to do all these ones at the same time, then I'm inviting you to make small, continuous, and sustainable changes. Don't go crazy with all of these kinds of things that you could do. You need to give your time for yourself. You need to consider self-care, and especially since, once again, you are in some sort of a vulnerable situation since your family and friends are not here. Those are the kinds of things that you need to keep in mind. So the best way to stimulate your mind is to space out, let's say, your study sessions or your work sessions, and rest in between, because it allows your brain to consolidate and strengthen your neural connections, basically. So I would say, in my case, I love hiking. That's something that I usually do. It allows me to think of different ways I can create new stuff that can help me in my job, for example. I also like to connect with my friends. Of course, right now it's via Zoom. But catching up with friends and family is something extremely important. And also, if you want to read, that's also another good thing, especially if you read in the language that you're supposed to use in here, which will be either English or French. And most importantly, you need to rest, because as I'm saying, rest allows your brain to redistribute all the knowledge that you had, flesh out all the bad stuff that your brain has got, and you will have a better judgment for all the things that you will have the next day. So highly recommended for you guys. And I know that it sounds obvious, but as you go through these different challenges, you will notice that you're resting less. So this is just a reminder for all of you to reconsider this. So you need to be prepared for, upcoming challenges. And at the end of the day, self-care is as important as the lessons I just previously mentioned, right? So just to recap, embrace change with humility. Patience is key. Maintain your branding. Build long-lasting relationships. Take some calculated risks. Be resilient and learn from setbacks. Be proactive. Volunteer. And of course, do anything. You can do anything, but you cannot do everything. And like, everybody can create his or her own path. So you have your list. You have selected some of the things that you might want to like from the ones that I've learned, and also you can come up with your own, right? So that's part of growing. And probably one of the last things that I will ask from everybody is just to share this with whatever you're learning, that you're able to share with others, because at the end of the day, once time flies, you will be able to help those people who just came from other countries, and that will be extremely valuable. So yeah, thank you.